to take us through this dance again. But what we found last time was that it's almost like the mind couldn't keep up with it. It's almost like we're going to do 9 different ballroom dances in like 12 minutes, but we're just going to do a couple steps of each one. Hey, Tenga, cha-cha-cha, moringa. What are you, crazy, Sid? How can we do all of this? But the idea is if we play with it, and it's like some people say that like your awareness can move at, I don't know, 100 megahertz per second, but the mind can only move at like 1 megahertz per second. And just see if we can play with these dances without you can notice a part that might want to understand and keep up or like, and that's fine. And we just keep playing and just see what happens. We'll see what happens. So if we're ready, we'll start with that we have 3 views in Effortless IFS. And for each of these views, we're going to have 3 dance steps. So the first one is we just focus entirely on self, only beingness for these first 3. And just a loving indifference to the parts, only self. And so my question for us is what's the most prominent flavor, feel of beingness that's here now? Is it love, safety, curiosity, joy, excitement, aliveness? It's your word. Peace, equanimity, stillness. You find your word. First one is, and we just sink into it. We sink in to this. And we sink in as this. So much so that it just resounds as this flavor of beingness. So that any parts that were listening, they could feel this sense of, wow, home, sanctuary, secure attachment can be found right here as we sink into this, as we are this. And then let's shift. Let's shift now to as we are abiding as this quality of beingness. Let's go a little more somatic to a sense of riding the bike, almost like riding a bike, right? In mind, it has nothing to do with the mind, finding a sense of balance. Can we find a sense of balance as that quality of beingness, as that peace, as that love, as that curiosity? Can we find the balance? And can we notice when a thought comes, we start to lose our balance? The bike starts to fall a little bit, but something in the system corrects it and comes back to this beingness, to abide as this. Maybe another thought goes, oh gosh, we're doing this again. Sid already did this before. We start to go into that thought, and then something corrects, just like on the bike. Come back, straight up, riding the bike. Something learns. How much can we rest as this balance, as this resting as self? Is it effortless? Can we put our hands in the air like riding the bike? It just kind of, it holds itself. Something has learned to stay here as home. And again, if there were any parts, they could sense, wow, this is something I could securely attach to. This beingness that's here. This is a place of safety. This is a place of home right here. And then as we're focused on in being self, go to the third way, which is what in India they call the path, the jnani path, the path of the knowing, of the mind, of clarity. And this is where the system just knows the difference between self and parts. It knows the difference between home, where the background, the sky, and the weather, a sense of clarity and knowing. Like it's a masculine sense here. Just it knows, it's clear. It's like driving a car and we stay within the lanes. The system just knows you stay within the lines. This is clarity. We remain as self. We abide as self. Why would we leave this? This clarity, this knowing. Those were our first three. And then my question for you is, which of those feel most conducive, most natural to your system for resting and abiding as self? Which is your flavor? Or maybe there's a different flavor for you, a different way that's even better. And then we're going to move from here, where we focus entirely on self, to the second view, which is one of simultaneous awareness of the background of self and the foreground of parts. So we're going to include parts now. And this is what we usually call the infinite hot tub or Rumi's guest house. So I'll invite us all to continue resting as whatever quality of self is most prominent here. And then my question for you is, what's the loudest part in your system right now? The loudest thought, loudest feeling. And as you notice that, see if you can find a sense of a location for it. Where do I hear that? And then from here, just feel what that's like to be aware of self and aware of this one part. And then I want to invite you to be also aware of the next loudest part in your system. Maybe this is hard, this is a lot, or this isn't so much fun. How much longer are we doing this? Can we be aware of these two parts at the same time? Can we see them both or be aware of both of them? If you can notice the difference between being aware of one part, which often is attention, and then to be aware of two, it requires a sense of stepping back into awareness. So as we're aware of these two parts, where are we aware from this beingness? And then what's your metaphor? Is it a sense of a hot tub, a Rumi's guest house, the galaxy? How do you make sense of this, the both and, the background and foreground? So this is where a lot of healing occurs. And does anything have to happen for this to occur, for there to be awareness of parts? Do they just naturally arise in the hot tub and they're just being held here? Last question on this one. Can the parts feel whatever quality of self is here? And they feel that sense of the secure attachment, the sense of home and okayness. And from here, we're going to open to the next way within the guest house, in the hot tub. And this is just one question. Can your parts be aware that they're not alone? This is the realization that they are part of an internal family system. Can your parts realize, and they see that there are other parts here and that they're part of a family? They don't have to carry this all on their own, on their shoulders by themselves. What happens when these aspects of you realize that there are other parts here too? Wow, there's a responsible part, there's a critic, there's an achiever. These are all aspects of me, and we're doing this together. What's that like? And then from there, can they also see that self is here, this background, this beingness is here, and that secure attachment is available here for them? And the last of this set of three, as we're aware of our parts, ideally, we're all aware of at least two parts right now. Can we all hear or feel two parts? Maybe one that's, wow, this is cool. I got to remember this. Or how much longer is this going to happen? Or my back hurts. Ever the thoughts, the parts are. And then the question I have for each of you is, what are the parts longing for? What are they longing for as you're aware of them? What are they longing for? Is it peace? Is it causeless okayness? Is it love? Is it joy? Is it safety? What are your parts longing for? And what's most like that which is here as the hot tub that is here in the background? What's most like what they're longing for? What they're needing for secure attachment? And hear the longing. The second group of three. And of those, where does your system resonate with the most of those three? The sense of just welcoming the parts, the sense of, wow, we're part of an internal family system, or this third, the sense of the longing of the part. What seems to be most natural for you? And from here, you might feel the edge of maybe even the kind of the pain of separation. Are the parts really completely separate from self? Or is the foreground separate, really separate from the background? Are the parts completely separate from self? So as we go into this third view, the sense of tasting that the possibility that all is of self, my invitation here is to do a version of what we call direct access in IFS, to let these parts have you, to let them blend, let them become beyond intimate with you so you can feel them. Whatever parts are here, I want, I don't want, you can really let them be felt. And ideally, you can let at least two in. You see what that's like to feel them both. This is the most difficult dance, sometimes the most painful dance. But for some, it's a non-dual direct path. If we let these in and let them be felt, because at this point for us, self is always here. There's a recognition that self is here. As we let these contractions, these parts be felt, in that tension, is there a sense that they're entirely separate from self? Or this self, this beingness that you are, can you sense it like starting to shine through these parts? Like they become somewhat transparent to your nature, to the self. What's it like? This is an alchemy to really to sit in this blendedness, the contraction, letting it have you, the self shine through. Okay, then we take a little breath and we shift from that to being aware of this third view, these last three, we're only focused on the parts. We're just focused on parts here. Like this first one, we let them inside our body, we let them blend with us. The second one, we asked the question that we did a couple back, like what are the parts longing for? What are they longing for? Is it peace, okayness, acceptance, love, safety? And then instead of looking to self outside of the part for this, can any of this that they're longing for be found within them, be found here now inside the part itself? If you can find the longing of the part, the longing of any wants that come up in you, within the want itself, within the part, is it possible that the answer is there, the fulfillment is there, the self is there within the part itself? Just to taste that, and then we'll go to the last one, the last of these three, which is it goes back to that clarity and knowing out of the path of Yanni. And this is the sense of just recognizing that everything is made of self, and nothing is separate from this beingness. Sometimes we call this recognizing, seeing the snake on the path and realizing, wait, it's a rope. Just this clarity of seeing. As you look at your parts, can there be a clarity? Wait a minute. I see self there. I see what they're really made of. I see the essence of the parts. Is this okayness, this peace, this love? Okay, good news. We are done with our 9 dances. We can come back together. And I'm going to invite you just to shake all of that off with me because that was crazy long and crazy a lot. And as we're shaking it off, really shaking it off, none of it needs to be maintained or held because again, in effortless IFS, there's a sense of nothing gets more beautiful than Inga just as she is right now. Nothing can be added. Inga cannot be enhanced. Goli cannot. Jack cannot. Sid cannot. We are this perfection. We are this beauty. And so as we just relax and breathe and shake it off, I'm going to do my little housekeeping really quick. That I'm a mediator. I'm not a psychotherapist. And so this is colleagues and friends together, not IFS psychotherapy. If everybody's good with being responsible for their own journeys, can I get a thumbs up from you, please? And secondly, as always, I've got the recording on. Anytime you want to be co-host and to turn it off with something you have to share, just let me know. We can do that. Only my image is shared, but your audio could be shared. And at the end, there's something that feels off, just let me know. I'll delete it. Everybody's good. This might be shared. Can I get a thumbs up from you, please? And thank you. Last, I got to apologize. I also feel like, God, that was so much. That was so long. That was so much. It was probably exhausting. I'm exhausted. What was that like? What was that like? What was that like? Does it work? Is this good? Is it useful? Or
Good.
should like Sid, you did this for two days. That's enough. Never do it again. How was that?
Gosh, I liked it, to be honest. I didn't think it was like too long or so. Um, so yeah, just in a couple of words, I enjoyed that.
And Inga, did you find was there one of like when we have these parts that are really looking for home, and
Mhm.
maybe right now there aren't parts looking for home, but was one of those where one or a couple of them were like, wow, that's a good one for my parts. That's a good one for my system. Did some of them like resonate as like that could be useful or more useful for your system than others?
Yeah, what really resonates is this intimacy, like the parts in the self, not just it's like it's made of the same. It's like they are one, this
Mm.
intimacy. Um, Also just the like, okay, just looking at the self, like what is here, what is present, the how does being that in it of its own shows up because in the parts are like, oh, okay, it's here, that's great. But then in my system like this, how it shows up, and you often ask like, how do parts make sense? Well, I don't know if I would say the galaxy, but it's more like there's this infinite space, and there's some kind of my analogy would be humidity, you know,
Mm.
like humidity in there, and then it forms like it forms something, can form something like a thought, like fog, or it can get more dense like water or ice. But it's all the same kind of, and it transforms. So yeah, if I can, that's just my image for today.
Well, that's a lot. Like just this the clarity. This is like this clarity. It's all the same. Maybe it is fog, but it just transforms, or like is the fog made of anything but water? Or is the ice made of anything but water? Sense of deeply hearing that, what Inga's sharing with us. Mm.
Mm.
And so for all of us, as we hear this from Inga, this is like this clarity, this updating, this knowing, this understanding. do we find that, yeah, Sid, like whatever, I get that. I've had that for the last 5 years. I know that, like you might be saying, but then do you also have parts of aspects of us, especially young ones or vulnerable ones, or some aspects that have been wounded along the way, that aspects of us that don't get that yet? That some of it might not, this clarity that Inga's sharing, some of it might not be so clear for some of our parts. Um, Golly, what was that like for you? This all these different dance steps. What did you find?
Well, I could be, I mean, you took me more abiding in the self with the first step. Like then I was seeing the parts from the viewpoint of self, of that balance, or which knows the parts come and go, which knows none of those are permanent, but at the same time, um, from that point of view, I know that um, I am whole with those parts. If like right now, right here, if I'm feeling whole, if I'm feeling complete, if there are some parts that are coming and going, they are needed for me to feel that. So um, it's like I am the totality of all those parts, and whatever is going at is coming and going. But yeah, at the same time, I know that they are not permanent. They are maybe at like yeah. I know that they are not always here. They can change. The parts can change. They can change the flavor. They can change the shape. They're like when I'm balanced on the bike, all these scenes are passing by. They change. Some scenes are green. Some like are dry. But they are all passing. They are not permanent. But I am as balanced rider. I am the totality of this whole whatever it is. Yeah.
What's it like for us to hear Gully describe that? I am the totality, including these parts in the totality. Does that work for each of our systems? It's like, nah, it plays differently in me. It's like I am the totality. And then she also shared, I am the whole with these parts. I am the whole. Hmm. Was there, and I can't tell if that's if this still plays like this in your system, Goalie. This idea in IFS that it's like we're looking for secure attachment is the game is to in classic IFS to find that secure attachment is always here and to help any aspects of us that might not feel that safety and love that you describe, find secure attachment is here. How does that play in your system or does it at all anymore?
Well, for me, the secure attachment is my heart, is myself, is um that feeling of safety that I find it in my heart. Um, yeah, other than that, um, yeah, if you call it a part, yeah, I can feel that attachment in my heart, that peace, that secure home that I always go.
Mm. It's this secure home in your heart that's here, and any kind of aspects of goalie that come up or parts, the sense of for them to feel and find that secure attachment is here, that home is here. How's that? This is How is it different for each of us than how it plays in Goldie's system? Secure attachment is here, safety is here, it's right here in my heart. Is that similar for us all? And how do you help go? And does it ever happen where there's a sense of an aspect of you, like let's say, I was in a hurricane here, and there was a hurricane in Florida, and there were kind of scared and overwhelmed parts of my system, and they were trying to, God, I need to get community from friends. There was a sense of insecurity and not safety. When that touches aspects of you, how does your system help it find that secure attachment is here in this heart, that safety is here? Or is it just everybody just kind of knows most of the time? It's kind of obvious in your system.
Um, there is a physical insecurity and there is like emotional insecurity. When there is physical insecurity, like hurricane, you said, or any other, like I recently, like 3 months ago, I lost my mother-in-law who was very dear for me. That is emotional. But when I see everything from my heart, I know all of those are part of this life. I mean, this life, this physical life. When as you said, when I know who I am in the background, but in foreground, everything comes and goes. It could be very mm, harmful, whatever comes and goes in. It can be really bad. But when I look at it as, um, I know that passes too. When I know
Mm,
that, then everything is smooth. It passes smoother because if I want or don't want, everything passes. Like um, if hurricane comes, it has some destruction, but then it has been always in years of years it happened. So I know it's uh, mm, while it's happening, it's really hard, but I know it passes. That knowledge, that knowing that nothing is permanent, it makes the passing become smoother. Um, I
mm,
can deal with it with that feeling of security within. That nothing will happen to that, but yeah, I can be harmed by hurricane. If accident happens, I can break my like my leg, my whatever. It happens physically, but I know they are not
yes.
permanent like that.
Yeah. And just this last question for us with this. Like there's a sense of Ngoli sharing, the sense that as we know home, as we know the self, the sense that the weather, these experiences that they come and go and that they pass. And then what about in the midst of it, midst of the difficult experience, midst of losing someone dear to us, hurricane or whatever the difficulty is, or it could be we hear the equanimity in Inga's system, even with the enthusiasm for the possible new puppy, if it doesn't work out. How do we find in the midst of that, in that moment, to find okayness is here, to know that I taste this in Goli's system, this heart, this safety that's here, this okayness. How does our system do that for each of us? Find that it is available. Let's shift thinking to go and hear how Jack's system plays with this or what this was all for him. But any final thoughts with that, goalie?
Mm. No, I just can like uh, before I feel that safety, that home within, um, I would take everything very seriously and I would suffer so much. Um, I would look at the world around me from the viewpoint of those parts. Like if something would happen, I would get angry, and I see through that. I see the world through that anger, and it would be very hard. Like I would suffer so much. Now I can see the difference when the viewpoint shifts within. Then the anger too comes and goes. The disappointment comes and goes. Even like those. But when I was one with them, like when I was seeing the world through the anger, I was the anger, and that would
Yeah.
make me like very tense.
What about, there's a big difference, big discernment there, what Goldie just said. Like, I was the anger. This is like when we're blended with the part versus when we're aware of the part that comes and goes. Big move. And that's just kind of part of the game with the IFS and seeing these as parts, able to see them as coming and going. Thanks, Goalie. Thank you for that. Before we go to Jack, just how's everybody doing? This has been kind of an intense. This has been heavy. There's been heaviness in this today, especially after the lightness of what Inga shared with the puppies, the possible puppy. It's like there's that and the bubbly that's there, and then we did those nine ways and talking about hurricanes and things. How are we doing? Like, what's here for you? How are you? What's here for you? What parts are here in the foreground right now? Is there like, oh, this is heavy. Come on, let's play more. Let's have more fun. What parts are here and what are they arising in? What's the beingness? What's the self that's here for you? Mm. What's going on, Jack? How was that for your system? Like you did this for the second time today, those playing with those nine things, and what was that like?
I started to sort of see a pattern inside the three different, I don't know what you're calling them, views. What's the three different upper
Yeah, just three views. Yeah.
three views? I started to see sort of a pattern in the three views, but it wasn't really quite there for all of them, maybe, or maybe it was. I just couldn't quite pick it out because the what is longed for is in two views, right?
Hmm.
And the clarity is in two views. I guess the self shining through all three views is sort of there in a way.
Mm.
Um, so that was interesting. Yeah, I just for me it was like, could that be formalized a little more, or or not? I guess. But it's definitely interesting to see if you've got two things, right? If you've got self and parts, it seems like there's four combinations of those, not just three,
What's the
right?
fourth?
Will be neither self nor parts. Self only, parts only, self and parts, and only neither, right? Neither self nor parts. Something maybe different, neither self nor parts. Um,
Let me
and
pause
for
for
me,
just let me pause for just a minute, just for all of us. Just just like the fun in this, the fun of how we make sense of our systems, right? Because like the fun of how we make sense of what's arising in us, we kind of like, oh, look what's happening. Because they're just Jack and I love playing with maps, but for some of us, it's just like who needs a map? We're just there's just this, but like just the fun of what we're playing with right here. Back to you, Jack.
yeah. So that came up, and I ca- one thing didn't that sort of resonated negatively with me is the idea. I think you put it up as secure attachment, and my experience is like attachment is gonna you're gonna attachment's an illusion, right? If you're attached to something, you're like counting on it being there.
Mm,
And
mm.
because, like you say, everything's changing, right? Feeling like I'm attached to anything sort of seems like it's 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 going to end up with disappointment, I guess.
Okay, so just how
So,
about
so you,
how,
we may just be using different terminology, or we may mean different things for the same word, but the idea of a secure attachment feels like an oxymoron. But hey,
that's beautiful, beautiful. Can we hear? Because in duality, the secure attachment is how lots of systems find peace. They find self. They become. It's like a path to self-realization. In just it's kind of classic psychology that we find this sense of attachment, home, safety outside of ourselves. And instead of finding it from another or from experience, we find it in self. But then the beauty of this discernment that we're hearing in Jack's system, that his can't really even go there anymore, of attaching to something, even self, that's outside of what is. What I'm hearing, there's just what is. That even that attachment doesn't work anymore. Please continue,
yeah,
Jack.
definitely an attachment to self will keep it separate from, in a sense, will keep it separate, right? Because if you're attached to something, yet it has to be separate for you to be attached to it,
Yes, yes, and that's where we
right? And
go with
that's a
it. That's
subtle thing. That's a subtle thing, but nonetheless, yeah.
right, and that's where we go in the third view, that we recognize that nothing is separate from this. But it's just it's really cool hearing how the clarity that plays in your system with it.
Yeah. And some of it just may be language getting in the way. But and that so that's the other thing though, that fourth, you have these three, the fourth one that neither self nor parts is um no, what would you call that? I guess not being attached to either self or parts is would be one way for me to look at it, right? Sort of being like, oh, the first one's like self only. Oh, it's all self, self only, right? And the second one, oh no, there's these parts here. There's self and parts. Okay. And the third one is like the parts sort of become very gossamer and self just shines right through all of them. So it's sort of a combination. And the fourth one would be there's really not self or parts, right? That how can things be separate if they're the same, right? And how can they be the same if they're separate? I don't know. But that's sort of what came up for me. But again, I'm just trying to point to something. I'm not trying to criticize what you're doing,
Oh,
really, as much as just sort of seeing where it took me.
what's this like to go? Because even the playing, this is it's just a very simple map. IFS is just a simple map that we play with self and parts. But it's a concession. Goalie and I spent time with Rupert. We were together with Rupert Spira a few months ago, and he uses the word concession. And so to even use this is like a concession to label something as self and parts, right? It's just, or Buddhists might call it a skillful means. But then we can see that it's all labels, and we can see beyond that or see through that. And I think that's what Jack's pointing to, this idea of like even beyond parts and self. What about that for our systems? It's kind of like what Inga was pointing to earlier with like seeing through it all as well. It's just all this. Any final thoughts with this before we open it up and see what's bubbling? We didn't hear much from Inga with all of this. Anything else, Jack?
No.
All right. So words, lots of ideas, all these dance steps. And then here we are. And it's like again the joke. Oh, we're all we're doing is going from here to here. It's just here. Here we are. No place to go. Here we are. The beauty of what we are. How's this going? What's this? What's it like, Inga? I was guessing like, what about all that bubbliness with the bubbling? How's this playing in your system?
It's very funny, I love when you said, Jack, of course, this is for a fourth view, like, like yeah, great. Um, Yeah, it's so funny. I think we talked about it once at this. Well, sometimes, prods show up with an image and very like a little girl or whatever, it doesn't need to be a human being even. But it's like sometimes they show up as parts, and sometimes it's more like, some form of density or I don't know. And eh, I'm just fascinated. It's like it's so fun. And then
Mm.
of course I have a positive, I'm just making this all up, but the images they come from I don't know where. So in the end, um, my parts get more comfortable with, there are sometimes, I get these images, like a little girl jumping around, like, I'm so happy. Or gosh, the other day I saw one of my parts really transforming. It's like, wow, right. Like a 6-year-old girl or part like being really shy, not even showing up as a human being so much. And she transformed into a 6-year-old saying, well, I'm Pippi Longstocking, I am strong. I can do whatever I want. And it's I have parts that judge that like, silly image, it's all not that's not very spiritual, but it shows up sometimes like that. And I can certainly feel that energy in the part saying, I'm strong. Yeah. So yeah.
I feel like first for us, we get to experience the joy in Inga as she describes the way parts show up in her, the way life is moving in her. When she describes, wow, in this part, wow, I'm Pippi Longstocking. I don't know if my friend Goli, who grew up in the Middle East, knows this. She knows this Pippi Longstocking too. Uh, but just the delight in how life is moving through Inga. It's like the celebration of how life is moving. Bubbly, puppy, Pippi Longstocking. And at the same time, the equanimity, the knowing, the clarity that she's describing. Oh, it's just like fog, and we see through that. Like we can see through it, the transparency of it all, perhaps the transparent, and then also the fullness of enjoying how it moves. Anything else with what that's like, Inga? The all of that?
Sid, and it's not either or. There can be the bubbliness and the peace at the same time. It's more on Scandal, there's not much of a difference. Like there's not so much of a difference between the joy and the grief. It's hard to say to tell. But yeah. Um, and you said something earlier, like how do we know that self is here or something like that? And it seems to me like parts. Wait a second. It is just getting easier and easier and more natural to acknowledge that, to see it. It's more like a seeing. And also for parts, it's the more often they got in contact with self, it's like, oh yeah, get it, see it.
And we enjoy that in Inga. The way she said that the knowing that self is here, it's just become more pervasive and more clear. And can we also see kind of what comes from that as self becomes more prominent in our system? Because she just said a really radical line just before that. She said that there's not much difference. It's hard to tell between joy and grief. what allows a system to get to that point where, wow, but because they're maybe because they're kind of made of the same, or like it's we all appreciate how our systems are opening to self, because this is a pretty advanced group of that we got right here with this today as far as the pervasiveness of stuff. I mean, Jack can't even, Jack, oh, secure tab. I can't even find that. That's a step backwards. It's just like, this is pretty cool. The enjoyment of that. And then also what Inga's pointing us to, even in the midst of, oh, there's just peace, there's just okayness here, then the fullness of the bubbly, the fullness of the parts that are coming up. Pippi Longstocking is here, and we're going out on an adventure. The fullness of all of that. What's this like for us? What comes up as we hear Inga share this? Anything bubbling?
I actually love what Inga said about like there's no difference between grief or joy. It's really just welcoming all the parts that makes who I am. It was really resonating. Thank you. I just wanted to mention that. I mean, yeah.
Like, if we truly, like you say, go, if there's truly a sense of fully welcoming all the parts that show up, even when the grief, sadness show up, like they're just so fully welcomed. That like,
Yeah. I mean, they all come up, all the parts come up from the self-love. I love myself, so I grieve for losing someone because I love that person. So everything comes from, or I am joyful to go and hold that puppy. I feel good, so I love myself. All these parts are welcome because they are coming to from that state of love for myself. So they are all welcome. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just, yeah.
with that, they're all welcome. Like the Buddhists sometimes some Buddhists sometimes simplify this and say the only problem is resistance. And as we hear Goli say, they're just so welcomed. And Inga, the sense of welcoming what's here, the joy and the grief. And what's it like if they're all welcome, if there's not resistance? Anything bubbling? Anything else? Inga, Jack, Goli with all this? Hmm.
Well, yeah, you sort of brought up the idea of, I forget which of the nine it was, but maybe the first or the third, the second or the third, the idea of self shining through, like the cosmos. So if self shines through uh, being envious, right? What's sort of left? If there's an envious part and self shines through that envious part, I guess all that's left is rejoicing for whatever whatever the part was envious of, right? So it's almost like the self in shining through sort of purifies the burdens, if you will. I'm trying to think in terms of IFS, or try to say it in terms of IFS. Or if I'm feeling particularly some kind of desire, right? I really want that. If self shines through that, what's left but sort of a discernment, like, oh, this is there and that's here. It's sort of it's a more discernment as opposed to a painful desire, right? So I do sort of like that idea of self shining through whatever sort of first arises. And in a sense, that sort of purifies that in a way that's, you could see the self essence of maybe something that might be painful or whatever.
Yes. And how did that, this has been a way that's been really valued in my system. And it might be, I'm probably going to write about it for the IFS community because at first it's all about getting unblended from parts. You want to unblend to get to know self. And then once we really get to know self is here, go to actually go intentionally the opposite direction and let the envy, the want, let the parts really blend, fully blend and fully have us. And then this shines through, this self shines through, this love shines through. I don't know what else to say other than when Jack
One thing,
speaks about it. Yeah, sorry, Inga.
I just want to say, one thing that came up, when the Jack said the self shines through, is also this exploring the parts. It's so, I can always see, I don't know if that's the same in your system, that these parts are coming from a place of care. Like deep down, all these parts are made of whatever I want to say, but it's care. Even the part, I had a time when I had parts of like, I'm going to harm myself, I'm going to kill myself.
No.
But my parts are not stupid, so they're like, well, this seems to be the only way to deal with what is, to handle the situation. I don't know what else to do. So they were trying to minimize, the emotional pain. But in the end, even those parts, they were coming from a place of trying to help, from a place of care. Yeah.
That seems to be another, like what you're pointing to, another way of this. It's like this just the appreciating. Hey, the suicidal part. It's so we all have when we have a suicidal part come up, we usually have some kind of critic comes up like that shouldn't be here. Oh my God, I can't believe there's a suicidal part here. But when we get beyond that and to where you're sharing, it's gorgeous, right? It's the sense of like seeing the innocence, seeing the good intention, seeing the love of that part and what it's there for. And I mean, I think that's another way of this shining through because we just see its beauty and it's like, whoa. And maybe Jack's thing, maybe if I was really expanding all of this, I would have a shining through for each of those of the three sets. That it just shines through. It shines through as we're appreciating the part that Inga's saying. Let's say we're in the hot tub and there's just such love and adoration and appreciation of the part that this beingness shines through. And this is how Advaita works. Advaita works with the first set where we just rest as the self and we just don't, we're loving indifference to the parts and eventually it just shines through. Hmm. Anything else? And I thought, anything else bubbling here? My thought is we might end maybe 15 minutes early today with the small group of us, and also that I've been required to put on my little legal hat and work today. It's but anything else? What else is anything else coming with all this? How's your system doing? Is it gentle enough? Was it kind enough today, or is there some exhaustion or parts like, hey, how are we doing?
Just want to say this is beautiful. I know what Jack said, this shining through, and that is something that kind of I want to just look for that a little bit more because it often felt, to really see, can I see that in the part itself, like shining from shining through, really seeing that. Yeah.
And then I'm really this is the most painful one for me sometimes for some of us. The shining through the part, but oof, and I even feel bad saying this, but like when we look at our little square, when we look at our image, can we see that here? This self, this beingness, some people call it radiant presence, is shining through this essence of this. I just want to say for some, it's a lovely practice, the mirror practice like this, because it then invites everything that is left that really can obscure it, the contractions that are still here. Like, what do you mean saying shining? Can't you see all the wrinkles? Can't you see your eyes hurt? Can't you see you've gained weight? Like, can't you see all that? How are you doing saying this is beautiful? This is radiant presence. This is self. Like to look at, to be with our images, to fully be with this. This is really scary for people, right? Even being in a room in silence for an hour can really be scary for a lot of people because it's just the parts that come up. And for some to look in the mirror and see ourselves, especially if you take off your clothes, and we're not doing that. But if you but like we have all these thoughts, all these parts that Jack, all these parts that come up, right? And it's a beautiful journey in welcoming them gently when the system's ready for it to see what's left and to welcome it and let it heal and let it come home and let the light shine through. How's it going? What do y'all think about that?
Love it.
Maybe that's a group that we do. We just come together and we look at our images and we just notice subtly the parts that come up as we say, as we look at the radiance and the beauty that we are. Notice the parts.
Where things touch. Like it's such a great experiment to, for example, put the hand on a table or on a tree. A tree is even more beautiful. Like put the hand on a tree, and then don't go into your mind, but just see. Well, can you really tell where the hand ends and where the tree begins? It's just like, well, I can't tell. My mind's like, oh, of course, this is the end, but it's hard to tell. There is the mind creates this end of the hand. This is where the tree begins, but it's not possible to really tell. So
I learned that pretty early, right?
mm-hmm.
Things I would bite and I wouldn't get hurt, and things I would bite and it would hurt. Like that's really far back in my ability to start that. Anyway.
Let's say we close pretty soon, maybe like 3 minutes, and anything else kind of bubbling other than like the greater connection that we got thanks to Jack of our squares. Anything else coming? Anything else here? How about that connectedness? And how about what Inga and Jack say, like where we end and the table begins, or where I end and Goalie begins here and Jack begins. And Jack started it off today by saying he's here. It's like, where is this here for all of us? Where are we here? Where does this here begin and where does it end? And is there something really yummy in that maybe a taste of the infant, the taste of the connectedness?
I
Yeah,
just
Gully.
want to say when you said when it begins and when it ends, for me, like it's always here, but it ends once I go and lose myself in my mind. Like then the here
Mm.
disappears, like I'm somewhere else into that thought. But when I stop the mind here again, it's just infinite here.
And then that takes me, Gully, to where you were earlier, talking about even in the midst of that, there's a knowing that it comes and goes, or this sense of like in Inga's system, like there's always this self, this being, this even when that happens. And I like this sense of grief and joy kind of starting to be the same. It's like when we go to the mind and we identify, okay, now Sid has to go and do this legal stuff. He's going to work. Even when that happens and it seems to contract into this, there seems to be the possibility at the same time there can be that recognition, the realization of it's just play in this of this.
Mm.
Uh, any
Yeah, it's
final words?
well, I just want to say, it seems like there are these moments when it's so enjoyable to be lost in the mind. You would think like, no, that's not very spiritual. But I remember like a couple of days ago, I drove. I was completely like daydreaming, and oh my gosh, I was enjoying that. That's the best thing ever.
Mm,
So I
um,
wonder if there's like you can be lost in the mind and completely present at the same time. It felt like that. So yeah.
I, I love that Inga as kind of an aspiration in this play. Just that to be able to be fully in time as Inga and Sid lost in the mind and this self, maybe even the self realized at the same time, know that I am self at the same time as being fully engaged and identified. More to come. We gotta do this was deep today. This was so deep today. Gosh, I've got so much, I mean, opened so many doors for me. Thank you for your depth, everybody. Thanks for where you guys
Thank
took us, where
you.
we went.
Thank
That
you
was
again.
amazing. Thank you.
It's so much
Thank you.
fun. Thank you, everyone.
No.
Yeah,
Bye.
I'm always here. I'm never there because here is where I'm in. And as I go from here to there, my here comes with me everywhere because here is where I'm in.
Yeah.
Here is where I've been.
Beautiful.
Anyway, that's a Muppet song, by the
Beautiful.
way.
It was beautiful.
Oh gosh, that
Thank
was
you.
so great. That was my highlight. Bye
Thank
everybody.
you. Bye.
Bye
Bye.
bye.